Energy moves through us in fascinating patterns. Watch a group of people facing the same challenge. Some leap into action with natural confidence. Others hesitate despite their obvious capability, while still others push forward with frustrated force that works against itself. These aren't just personality differences. They're expressions of something more fundamental: our relationship with our vital force, our capacity to act and transform. This force expresses itself in countless ways throughout our lives. In the artist who knows exactly when to make that bold brushstroke and when to step back and wait. In the parent who can shift seamlessly between gentle nurturing and fierce protection. In the entrepreneur who recognizes the perfect moment to launch, neither rushing too soon nor waiting too long. When this energy flows naturally, life itself becomes a dance of elegant timing. But for many of us, this force gets tangled. We feel it in that peculiar form of frustration where we know exactly what needs to be done, yet something keeps us frozen in place. Or in those moments when we finally take action, but it comes out rushed and clumsy, missing its mark entirely. Sometimes it shows up as a constant low-grade irritation, a sense that life shouldn't be this hard, that we shouldn't have to fight ourselves for every step forward. These patterns run deeper than simple motivation or discipline. They show up in our bodies, in persistent tension that no amount of massage seems to fix, in energy that swings between exhaustion and restless agitation. They appear in our relationships, where we either can't establish proper boundaries or end up pushing people away with rigid ones. They manifest in our work, where we either can't get started or can't let go, perpetually caught between paralysis and perfectionism. What makes these patterns particularly fascinating is how they affect our capacity for growth. Life is fundamentally about training, about becoming stronger, more capable, more refined in our responses to challenges. But when our vital force is troubled, even the most basic forms of self-improvement feel like pushing against an invisible wall. We make plans, set goals, establish routines, yet somehow find ourselves stuck in the same patterns, fighting the same battles over and over. Yet within these very struggles lies a profound opportunity. Because this force, this capacity for effective action and transformation, never actually diminishes. It can be blocked, tangled, or misdirected, but its essential power remains. Understanding how it moves, how it gets blocked, and how it can be restored to its natural flow opens up entirely new possibilities for how we engage with life itself. These energy patterns begin forming in our earliest relationships, long before we can name them. Some of us arrive with Mars burning hot and bright, like a flame that needs to learn gentle containment. Others come with this force naturally reserved, like a deep well waiting to be fully accessed. Still, others enter life with this energy tangled in complex ways, creating unique patterns in how we connect with others. Consider someone whose initial difficulty with setting boundaries leads them to develop extraordinary sensitivity in navigating relationships. Or the person whose early struggles with emotional overwhelm transform into a remarkable capacity for staying centered in intense connections. These aren't compensations for defects. They're sophisticated adaptations that add depth and complexity to how we engage with love and intimacy. Let's explore how these patterns manifest, starting with one of the most common, when our vital force becomes constricted by Saturn, the force of limitation and structure. Imagine a child whose expressions of love were consistently met with withdrawal or criticism. The warm hug met with stiffness, the excited sharing answered with dismissal. Over time, their natural impulse to reach out becomes wrapped in layers of hesitation. This creates what ancient astrologers called Saturn starving Mars, a pattern where our vital force becomes constrained by fear of emotional consequences. This pattern shows up subtly but persistently in adult relationships, in moments where we want to express love but find ourselves holding back, in situations where we need to set a boundary but freeze instead, in relationships where we suppress our desires until resentment builds. The mind creates elaborate justifications for this withdrawal, but underneath lies a simple truth. Our vital force has learned to doubt its right to take up emotional space. Even more complex is when Saturn moves beyond starving Mars to actively shaming it. This often stems from environments where displays of emotion were not just discouraged but punished. Think of the child told big boys don't cry, or good girls don't get angry. They learn not just to suppress their force, but to feel fundamentally wrong for having it. As adults, these individuals often find themselves in relationships where they're valued for their stability and restraint, yet internally they're disconnected from their own emotional vitality. When the Sun shames Mars, we encounter a different kind of relational wound. Picture a child whose natural expressions of love and protection were met with excessive praise and attention, creating not confidence, but an unbearable pressure to perform. The child who was constantly told, "You're such a good helper," or "You're so good with your younger siblings," until these natural capacities became burdens rather than gifts. Their vital force becomes entangled with expectations, creating a peculiar kind of performance anxiety in relationships. The Sun's agitation of Mars adds another layer to this pattern. These individuals might find themselves inspired to act in relationships, but unable to adapt when things don't go as planned. They have strong impulses to love and protect, but become frustrated when reality doesn't match their vision of how relationships should unfold. Think of the person who plans the perfect romantic gesture, but falls apart when circumstances require spontaneous adjustment. Moving to the state of Mercury starving Mars, we encounter one of the most subtle yet pervasive patterns in modern relationships. This manifests as the tendency to analyze feelings instead of expressing them, to intellectualize connections instead of living them fully. Think of someone who can brilliantly explain attachment theory, but freezes when a partner reaches for emotional intimacy. Or the person who spends hours crafting the perfect text message but can't engage in spontaneous emotional exchange. This pattern often develops in families where emotional expression was replaced by discussion about emotions. Consider the child whose tears were met not with comfort, but with questions. "Let's talk about why you're feeling this way." While seemingly supportive, this response teaches the child to process feelings through the mind rather than experience them directly. The vital force learns to second-guess itself, always seeking understanding before allowing action. In adult relationships, Mercury's starvation of Mars creates a peculiar form of paralysis. These individuals often become excellent relationship counselors for their friends, offering insightful advice about others' situations while remaining stuck in their own. They might spend hours analyzing their relationships, understanding every nuance of their patterns, yet struggle to make the simplest emotional moves, whether it's expressing affection, showing vulnerability, or setting basic boundaries. The pain of this pattern lies in its self-reinforcing nature. Each hesitation becomes another data point to analyze, each missed opportunity another reason to reflect. The person might read countless relationship books, attend workshops, or spend years in therapy, gathering more and more knowledge while feeling increasingly disconnected from their capacity for simple emotional action. Their vital force becomes trapped in an endless loop of analysis, never quite finding its way to expression. Dating in the digital age amplifies this pattern dramatically. The endless options for connection become not opportunities, but data to process. Each potential match turns into a research project, each conversation a text to analyze. The natural flow of attraction and response gets lost in a maze of possibilities and perspectives. These individuals might spend hours curating the perfect dating profile while struggling to show up authentically in actual connections. What makes this pattern particularly challenging is how it masquerades as wisdom. The ability to see all sides of a situation, to understand complex emotional dynamics, seems like it should lead to better relationships. Yet without the capacity for direct emotional action, this understanding becomes another layer of separation from authentic connection. It's like having an extremely detailed map but being unable to start the journey. The path to healing our vital force begins with understanding that each positive Mars pattern offers unique medicine for our struggles. Let's explore these healing states, not as simple fixes, but as profound transformations that reshape our entire relationship with power and action. When the Sun delights Mars, power finds its purpose. This combination reaches directly into those places where shame has created shadows, illuminating them not with harsh judgment, but with clear understanding. Imagine a garden where certain plants were forced to twist away from light. When sunlight finally reaches them properly, they don't just straighten, they transform their very nature of growth. Similarly, under the sun's delight, our twisted patterns of power don't just correct themselves, they reveal their deeper purpose. For those who've lived with Mercury's starving effect, constantly analyzing instead of acting, the sun's delight creates an alchemical shift. Rather than trying to think their way into right action, they discover what we might call illuminated impulse, the capacity to act from clear seeing rather than endless deliberation. Their intelligence becomes a lens for focusing power rather than a maze for losing it. The moon's delight brings a different quality of transformation, one that particularly touches those places where our vital force has become disconnected from emotional wisdom. This isn't just about becoming more sensitive, it's about discovering how sensitivity itself can be a form of strength. Like water shaping stone, emotional intelligence under the moon's delight becomes a sophisticated force for transformation. This lunar blessing proves especially profound for those healing from Saturn's constrictive patterns. Where rigid boundaries once served as armor, they discover the possibility of fluid strength. Their protective instincts don't disappear, but evolve into something more sophisticated, like a martial artist who learns to blend with force rather than either collapse before it or rigidly resist it. Jupiter's delight unveils perhaps the most expansive transformation of our vital force. This combination reaches into those places where power has become entangled with the ego's needs, revealing how personal force can serve universal purpose. For those recovering from Rahu's driven patterns of endless proving and achieving, Jupiter's influence offers not just relief but revelation, showing how the same energy that once drove them to exhaust themselves can fuel contributions that actually fill them with vitality. But it's when these positive influences begin to work in concert that the deepest healing occurs. Imagine someone recovering from a complex pattern where Mercury's paralysis meets Saturn's constriction, common in those who learned early that both action and inaction carried heavy consequences. The sun's delight gives them clear purpose, the moon adds emotional wisdom, and Jupiter reveals how their very struggles have prepared them to understand power in uniquely sophisticated ways. When Mars stands proud, something extraordinary emerges. Not just the integration of different strengths, but the discovery of power's natural dignity. This state speaks particularly to those carrying complicated shame patterns around their force. They learn that power doesn't need to justify itself any more than a rose needs to explain its thorns. Both protection and beauty become natural expressions of the same vital force. This integration of positive Mars states creates transformations more profound than any single influence could achieve alone. Consider how these combinations specifically heal our deepest patterns. When sun's delight and moon's wisdom work together, they create what we might call enlightened responsiveness. This reaches especially deep for those caught in Mercury's analytical paralysis. Instead of the endless mental cycling between options, they discover a new way of knowing, one that combines clear purpose with emotional attunement. A decision that once would have triggered hours of analysis now flows through both their clarity and their feeling nature, like a river finding its perfect course through the landscape. For those healing from Saturn's constriction, this sun-moon combination brings another layer of sophistication. The sun's light helps them recognize their right to take up space, while the moon's influence helps them attune to exactly how that space should be held. Think of how a skilled parent learns to set boundaries, not from rigid rules, but from a deep attunement to what each moment requires. Their vitality expresses itself through discernment rather than force. Jupiter's delight adds another dimension entirely when it joins this dance. For those recovering from shame-based patterns, particularly where Rahu's ambition has twisted their relationship with achievement, this threefold combination proves transformative. They discover that power isn't just about personal capacity or emotional intelligence. It's about participating in life's larger unfolding. Their force becomes not just well-timed but well-purposed, serving something greater than individual success. These combinations reveal themselves most beautifully in intimate relationships, where our patterns of power and vulnerability interweave most complexly. Someone healing from sun shame patterns might discover how Jupiter's expansive wisdom transforms their very relationship with capability. Instead of feeling burdened by their competence, they find joy in how their strength naturally uplifts others. The moon's influence ensures this power remains relationally attuned, while proud Mars maintains their authentic dignity. For those carrying Ketu's spiritual shame around power, the combination of Jupiter's delight with proud Mars offers unique medicine. Jupiter helps them see how earthly power can serve spiritual purpose, while proud Mars restores their natural right to embodied strength. The moon's additional influence helps them navigate the subtle territory between transcendence and engagement, showing how spiritual sensitivity and practical force can coexist beautifully. When all these positive influences work in harmony, we discover what ancient traditions called noble power, force that serves life itself rather than ego's demands. This isn't just about becoming more effective or even more wise in our use of power. It's about allowing our vital force to participate in the cosmic dance of creation itself. Our actions become expressions not just of personal will, but of universal creativity moving through us. This highest integration shows itself in moments of perfect timing, when strength and sensitivity, purpose and flexibility, personal power and universal service all align naturally. These aren't just rare peak experiences, but become increasingly available as we learn to work with, rather than against our vital force. Each challenging pattern we carry becomes not an obstacle, but an invitation to discover more sophisticated expressions of power. The cultivation of these positive Mars states begins with understanding that transformation doesn't happen through force. It emerges through conscious engagement with our vital energy. Let's explore some practical pathways for developing each positive pattern, understanding that these practices build upon each other to create lasting change. To invite the sun's delight of Mars, we begin with what we might call purposeful presence practice. This isn't about trying to feel powerful, but about noticing where authentic power already exists in our lives. Start with small moments, the natural authority you feel when protecting something you love, the clear strength that emerges when standing for truth, the quiet force present in maintaining healthy boundaries. Each time you notice this authentic power, pause to fully feel it in your body. This creates new neural pathways that recognize and remember what genuine, purpose-aligned force feels like. The development of Moon's delight requires a different approach. Begin by tracking your energy patterns throughout the day, particularly noticing when your vitality feels naturally responsive rather than either forced or blocked. Pay attention to those moments when strength and sensitivity merge effortlessly, perhaps in caring for a child, engaging in creative work, or moving through nature. These instances of fluid power become your teachers, showing you what embodied wisdom feels like. For those healing from Mercury's analytical paralysis, combine these observations with what we call timed action practice. Set a specific duration, perhaps 3 minutes, during which you'll act without analysis. Start with low-stakes situations, arranging flowers, organizing a drawer, or expressing appreciation to someone. The key isn't what you do, but practicing direct engagement without mental interference. Gradually, this capacity for clear action extends into more complex situations. Jupiter's delight develops through what ancient traditions called noble practice. Each day, consciously choose one action that serves something greater than yourself. This isn't about grand gestures, but about infusing regular activities with larger purpose. When cooking, feel how your energy contributes to others' nourishment. When listening to someone's struggles, sense how your attention serves their healing. This practice gradually transforms your relationship with power from personal to universal. For those carrying Saturn's constrictive patterns, begin with what we call boundary dancing. Instead of rigid rules about when to engage or withdraw, practice subtle adjustments to your force, like a dancer constantly adjusting to their partner. In conversations, experiment with small shifts in your energy. Notice how others respond when you increase or decrease your presence. This develops the capacity for flexible strength that neither overwhelms nor abandons. Transforming shame-based patterns requires what we might call dignity practice. Each morning, take 3 conscious actions that express your natural right to exist powerfully. These might be as simple as speaking your truth quietly, taking up appropriate space in a room, or following through on a commitment to yourself. The key is doing these actions not to prove anything, but to embody your inherent nobility. The cultivation of proud Mars emerges through what we call integrated power practice. This involves consciously engaging your force in its full spectrum, from fierce protection to gentle nurturing, from decisive action to wise restraint. Throughout your day, notice opportunities to express different qualities of power. Let your force be fluid rather than fixed, responsive rather than reactive. For those healing from Rahu's driven patterns, develop what we call sufficiency practice. Before each action, pause to sense whether it arises from genuine necessity or from the need to prove something. Learn to distinguish between force that serves life and force that serves ego. This discrimination gradually transforms ambitious energy into purposeful power. These practices weave together in daily life through what we might call conscious energy engagement. Start your day by sensing your vital force. Is it flowing naturally, blocked, scattered? Like tuning an instrument, adjust your practice to what each day requires. Some days need more emphasis on purpose, others on sensitivity, others on noble action. Central to all these practices is maintaining awareness of how your force expresses moment by moment. Notice what triggers constriction, what invites flow, what inspires noble action. This constant attention gradually reveals patterns you couldn't see before, allowing increasingly subtle adjustments to your energy. Now, the challenge is in maintaining these positive Mars states through day-to-day occurrences. This requires understanding how different types of situations activate our old patterns. Let's explore how to keep our vital force flowing freely, even when life tests us most intensely. Consider what happens in relationship conflicts, where our most ingrained patterns often surface. Someone who's developed a beautiful combination of sun's delight and moon's wisdom might suddenly find themselves reverting to Mercury's paralysis during a heated argument. The key here isn't to fight against this regression, but to recognize it as an opportunity for deeper integration. Begin by acknowledging the intensity of the moment. Feel how the old pattern tries to protect you. Then consciously invite your newer, more sophisticated relationship with power to engage. Here's a practical example. When tension rises in a crucial conversation, implement a layered response. First, ground yourself in physical sensation. Feel your feet on the floor, your breath in your body. This activates proud Mars's natural dignity. Then, sense the larger purpose of the interaction, inviting Jupiter's noble perspective. Finally, let Moon's wisdom guide the timing and intensity of your response. This isn't about performing perfect responses, but about maintaining connection with your vital force, even as challenges arise. Professional situations often trigger our achievement-related patterns. Someone healing from Rahu's driven energy might feel the old compulsion to prove themselves during a high-stakes presentation or important meeting. Here's where we can follow the invitation to practice noble presence. Instead of fighting the surge of ambitious energy, redirect it toward service. Ask yourself, how can this moment contribute to everyone's growth? This shifts the force from personal proving to universal purpose. Financial challenges test our relationship with power in particularly profound ways. When money gets tight or resources feel scarce, Saturn's constrictive patterns often resurface. This is where combining Sun's clear purpose with Jupiter's expansive wisdom becomes crucial. Take actions that arise not from fear of scarcity but from trust in your capacity to generate value. Even small actions, when infused with this consciousness, begin shifting the underlying pattern. Health situations bring their own special challenges to our Mars patterns. Physical illness or injury can trigger deep feelings of powerlessness, often reactivating old shame or inadequacy patterns. This is where proud Mars's wisdom becomes essential. Engage with medical challenges not from a place of deferent passivity, but from embodied wisdom. Let your vital force participate actively in your healing process while maintaining humble recognition of what each moment requires. Family gatherings often activate our most primitive Mars patterns as old roles and expectations resurface. Here's where the sophisticated combination of Moon's emotional wisdom and Sun's clear purpose proves invaluable. Practice what we call pattern recognition without pattern repetition. Notice old triggers arising, but choose to engage them with your evolved understanding of power. Each family interaction becomes an opportunity to express your vital force in more refined ways. During periods of creative challenge or career transition, Mercury's analytical paralysis often tries to reassert itself. This is where Jupiter's delight offers crucial medicine. Instead of trying to think your way through uncertainty, take small steps that align with your larger purpose, letting the path reveal itself through engagement rather than analysis. Each action, however modest, builds momentum for the next. Finally, perhaps the most subtle challenges arise in spiritual practice, where Ketu's transcendent pull might tempt us to bypass our embodied power. Here's where integrating proud Mars with Jupiter's wisdom becomes essential. Just let your spiritual energy express itself through grounded action rather than ethereal escape. Each mundane task becomes an opportunity to unite heaven and earth through conscious use of your vital force. The key to maintaining positive Mars states through all these challenges lies in flexibility. Instead of expecting perfect consistency, develop the ability to recognize when you've slipped into old patterns and consciously re-engage your evolved relationship with power. Each challenge becomes not a test to pass, but an opportunity to discover more sophisticated expressions of your vital force. But to fully understand how Mars patterns shape our lives, we must look to their earliest foundations. In the ancient wisdom of astrology, Mars holds a fascinating dual nature. It represents not only our vital force and will to act, but also embodies the profound energy of the mother. Specifically, Mars governs our relationship with maternal protection during our most formative years, from ages 1 to 3, when our understanding of both power and safety first takes root. This connection between Mars and motherhood isn't merely symbolic. Just as a mother's energy naturally flows between fierce protection and nurturing guidance, our own Mars energy expresses this same fundamental pattern. Whether we're setting boundaries in relationships, pursuing goals, or facing challenges, we're drawing upon this primal template of power that was first demonstrated to us through maternal care. So while we've explored how these patterns manifest in adult relationships and challenges, there's an even more fundamental layer to consider, one that begins in our very first years of life, when our understanding of power and protection first takes form. Between ages 1 and 3, a profound template for our relationship with vital force develops through our connection with Mother. During this critical period, we learn not just about safety and danger, but about our very right to exist as powerful beings in the world. Through Mother's protection, we discover how force can serve love. Through her containment, we learn the delicate dance between freedom and boundaries. Think of how a mother moves through her day with her young child. One moment, she's keeping them from danger with swift, decisive action. The next, she's creating gentle space for exploration. Without thinking, she flows between fierce protection and nurturing presence, showing us our first example of how power can be both strong and tender, both decisive and receptive. This early patterning creates the foundation for all our later relationships with power. The child whose mother provided consistent, loving protection learns that their vital force is natural and welcome in the world. They internalize a sort of secure power, the deep knowing that they can be both strong and loving, both boundaried and connected. However, when this early maternal connection is disrupted, our relationship with power develops differently. Saturn's starving of Mars often traces back to moments where maternal protection felt either overwhelming or unreliable. Think of the child whose mother's anxiety created rigid restrictions, teaching them to doubt their natural impulses. Or consider how Mercury's paralyzing patterns might reflect environments where maternal protection came through excessive warning rather than embodied wisdom. Understanding these maternal origins transforms how we approach healing. For those of us struggling with Mercury's analytical paralysis around decision-making, rather than just practicing decisive action, we might need to reconnect with that innate knowing that guides a mother's protective instincts. The healing journey becomes about recovering trust in our natural protective impulses rather than developing better analytical tools. For those carrying Saturn's constrictive patterns, healing takes on new depth through this maternal lens. Their journey isn't just about learning to take up space or assert boundaries, it's about reclaiming the fundamental authority to protect what they love and nurture what needs growth. Each step toward proud Mars becomes a restoration of their original birthright as beings capable of both strength and tenderness. Also, during this time from 1 to 3, three distinct phases of power awareness emerge, each laying foundation stones for our later relationship with vital force. The first awakening occurs around age 1, with the mastery of walking. This moment represents our first taste of genuine independence, our initial experience of moving through the world on our own terms. Watch any toddler taking their first steps. You'll witness not just physical achievement, but the dawn of personal power. Their face lights up with the realization, I can move myself wherever I want to go. This foundational experience shapes our basic trust in our right to move through life with autonomy. But walking brings more than independence. It introduces us to the reality of falls and collisions. How these moments were met profoundly influences our later relationship with failure and recovery. A child whose stumbles were met with calm encouragement develops resilient power, the deep knowing that setbacks don't diminish their fundamental right to keep moving forward. Conversely, excessive protection or criticism during these moments can create lasting hesitation patterns. The second phase emerges around 18 months with the discovery of no, that magical word that represents our first conscious wielding of will. This isn't mere defiance, but the awakening of personal choice. Through saying no, we learn that our internal preferences can affect external reality. The way this assertion of will was received creates lasting patterns in how we express opposition and set boundaries in adult life. Consider how differently this power develops based on early responses. A child whose reasonable no was respected learns that their will matters, that they have the right to define their own boundaries. But if that same no was consistently overridden or punished, they might develop patterns where power goes into hiding but emerges in indirect ways. The third phase, occurring around age 2 to 3, introduces us to the complexity of power in relationships. This is when we first encounter the need to balance our force with others' needs, whether with siblings, peers, or parents. Watch children this age navigating ownership of toys or space in a playground. They're not just playing, they're learning sophisticated lessons about when to assert, when to yield, and how to protect what matters to them. These early power negotiations create templates for all our later interactions with force. A child who learned that protecting their boundaries meant losing connection might develop patterns of yielding to keep peace. Another, who found that only dramatic displays of force got their needs met, might carry that intensity into adult relationships. Understanding these developmental roots transforms how we approach healing our challenging Mars patterns. Someone struggling with Mercury's analytical paralysis might trace this hesitation back to early experiences where their natural movement was met with excessive caution or control. Their healing journey becomes about reclaiming that original toddler's delight in free movement, rather than just working on decision-making skills. For those carrying Saturn's constrictive patterns, understanding might lead back to early experiences where exploration was met with rigid limits rather than guided protection. Their path to proud Mars involves reconnecting with that fundamental right to move through space that every toddler naturally claims. As we draw our exploration to a close, let's acknowledge a profound truth about human development. Every one of us carries the imprint of our earliest experiences with power. These patterns, formed when we were barely old enough to speak, continue to shape our adult relationships, careers, and sense of self. Yet understanding this offers us an extraordinary opportunity for transformation. I'd like to invite you to try something that might shift your entire perspective on human behavior. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the important people in your life as 3-year-olds. See your partner, your boss, your challenging family member, not as the adults they present themselves to be, but as tiny humans still learning to navigate their own force in the world. Watch how their current patterns of relating to power suddenly make perfect sense. The colleague who never speaks up in meetings appears as a toddler who learned early that their voice wasn't welcome. The friend who constantly overrides others' boundaries shows up as a small child who had to shout to be heard. The family member who can never say no reveals themselves as a tiny being who learned that compliance was the only path to love. This visualization isn't just an exercise in compassion, though it certainly develops that. It's a profound key to understanding how our Mars patterns operate, and more importantly, how they can be transformed. Just as our challenging patterns were learned when our brains were most plastic and adaptable, our capacity for developing new, healthier patterns remains equally potent. Here's what's fascinating from a psychological perspective. Our nervous system doesn't actually distinguish between patterns we were born with and patterns we consciously cultivate. When we consistently act as if we embody proud Mars, when we practice expressing our force with Moon's emotional wisdom or Jupiter's noble purpose, we literally reshape our neural pathways. We're not pretending, we're rewiring. Think of it like learning a new language. Just as a child absorbs their native tongue through immersion, we can absorb new ways of relating to power through conscious practice. Each time we choose to act from clear purpose rather than old fear, each time we express strength with sensitivity instead of rigidity, we're not just behaving differently, we're becoming different. This understanding liberates us from the tyranny of our birth patterns. Whether our chart shows Saturn starving Mars or Mercury paralyzing our action, we can develop the neural pathways of proud Mars, of Moon's delight, of Jupiter's noble force. We're not confined by our early programming. We're invited to participate consciously in our own reprogramming. The key lies in understanding that transformation doesn't require us to erase our old patterns, an impossible task that only creates more internal conflict. Instead, we're developing new patterns alongside the old ones, gradually strengthening these healthier neural pathways until they become our natural way of being. Like a river finding a new course through the landscape of our psyche, our vital force learns to flow in more life-serving ways. As we close, remember, every pattern of power you see in yourself and others began with a tiny human doing their best to survive and thrive with the resources they had. Our task now isn't to judge these patterns, but to consciously develop new ones that better serve life's unfolding. In this way, we honor both our past and our potential, recognizing that each moment offers a new opportunity to express our vital force with greater wisdom, sensitivity, and purpose. The journey of transforming our Mars patterns isn't just personal healing, it's participation in human evolution itself. As we learn to embody more sophisticated expressions of power, we create new possibilities not just for ourselves, but for all those whose lives we touch. This is the profound invitation that understanding Mars offers us, to transform our relationship with power in ways that serve the flourishing of all life. The journey we've explored together reveals a profound truth. Transforming our relationship with power isn't just possible, it's our natural birthright. Whether you recognize yourself in Saturn's hesitation, Mercury's analysis, or the Sun's shame patterns, understanding these dynamics is your first step toward liberation. But understanding alone isn't enough. Real transformation requires guidance, support, and practical tools for integration. This is especially true when working with patterns formed in our earliest years, patterns that often feel too deep or too complex to address alone. This is why I offer specialized counseling support for those ready to transform their Mars patterns. Through one-on-one sessions, we can identify your specific Mars patterns and their developmental origins, create personalized practices that work with your unique life circumstances, navigate challenging transitions as new patterns emerge, and build lasting integration of more empowered ways of being. What makes this work different is its foundation in both ancient astrological wisdom and modern developmental psychology. We'll work not just with your present challenges, but with their earliest roots, creating transformation that reaches to the core of your relationship with power. Each session provides a safe container for exploring and transforming these fundamental patterns. Whether you're dealing with decision paralysis, struggling to maintain boundaries, or seeking to express your power more authentically in relationships, this work offers practical pathways to lasting change. So, if you've resonated with this exploration of Mars patterns, if you recognize these dynamics playing out in your life and relationships, I invite you to take the next step. Contact me through the link below to schedule a consultation. Together, we can begin the journey of transforming your relationship with power. not just for your own benefit, but for all those your life touches. Remember, the patterns you carry are not your destiny. They're the starting point for a profound journey of transformation. Your vital force is waiting to express itself with greater wisdom, clarity, and purpose. The only question is, are you ready to begin?